Imagine standing in a crowded square, the air heavy with chants of justice, voices demanding fairness, banners raised with words like equality, freedom, and rights. For a moment, the sound is intoxicating. You feel the pull of unity, the warmth of 1,000 people insisting that no one should ever stand above another. It feels righteous, undeniable, almost sacred. Yet, beneath that euphoria, a chilling question begins to whisper. Is it possible for humans to ever be truly equal? Or is that very dream a mirage, a beautiful illusion that collapses the moment we reach for it? From the earliest civilizations, humanity has lived in hierarchies. Some ruled, some served. Some accumulated wealth, others struggled to survive. Even in societies that proclaimed liberty, invisible lines always divided one group from another. Despite revolutions, despite declarations, despite laws passed in the name of equality, differences stubbornly persist. In power, in intellect, in desire, in fate itself. It is here, in this uncomfortable truth, that we encounter the ancient mind of Aristotle, who dared to say what few modern ears wish to hear. Humans will never, and perhaps should never, be truly equal. Aristotle, unlike his teacher Plato, who envisioned an ideal republic, looked at the world with brutal pragmatism. To him, not all men were meant to rule. Some were natural slaves, others natural rulers. His words pierce us today, not because we agree, but because the shadow of their logic still haunts us. For if equality is our highest ideal, why has it never been fully achieved? Why do we find ourselves always struggling toward it, yet never quite arriving? The paradox deepens when we look inward. Even within one human life, there is inequality. Think of your own desires. You want rest, but also progress. You crave love, but also freedom. One part of you hungers for meaning, another for pleasure. Inside the single human being, hierarchies of impulse and reason battle endlessly. How then can an entire species, with billions of conflicting wills, achieve perfect equality when a single person cannot find it within themselves? Consider how nature itself rebels against the dream. No two leaves are alike. No two fingerprints identical. Human beings emerge from the womb with differences already stamped upon them: height, strength, temperament, cognitive ability. To declare we are equal may satisfy a moral urge, but reality whispers otherwise. The strongest runner will always outrun the weakest. The keenest mind will always think what others cannot. And yet, paradoxically, those very differences are what drive human culture forward. Without inequality, there would be no discovery, no leadership, no art born of suffering, no revolutions driven by those who could not accept their assigned place. Here lies the uncomfortable possibility. Perhaps inequality is not a failure of humanity, but the very condition of its existence. To seek to erase it entirely may be to seek the erasure of humanity itself. And still we resist. We write constitutions. We march in streets. We sacrifice lives in revolutions. Because though nature denies us perfect equality, our hearts burn with the idea of it. It is here that philosophy collides with psychology. The tension between what we want to believe and what reality continually reveals. Jean-Jacques Rousseau once declared, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains." Yet perhaps the deeper tragedy is this: man is not born free at all. He is born into differences, constraints, limitations that no law can dissolve. What then becomes of equality? Is it an eternal struggle against the very fabric of existence, or a noble lie we must tell ourselves to make life bearable? This is where Aristotle stands as a haunting figure. His vision of human nature was not drenched in sentiment, but in structure. He saw inequality not as a flaw to be corrected, but as an unshakable law of being. To explore this claim is to step into dangerous territory, for it forces us to question whether our moral striving is enlightened idealism or self-deception. The stage is set. The dream of equality glimmers before us, yet the ground beneath it begins to crack. In the next step, we must descend deeper into Aristotle's vision. What did he mean by natural rulers and natural slaves? And why does his reasoning continue to unsettle us centuries later? Step now into the mind of Aristotle, a man who walked the marble streets of Athens while the shadows of empire stretched across the Mediterranean. Unlike modern thinkers who might veil harsh truths in the language of progress, Aristotle confronted reality as he perceived it, stark, unapologetic, unmoved by sentiment. He believed that to understand society, one must first understand the natural order of life itself. And at the core of this vision stood a doctrine that continues to trouble us: natural inequality. For Aristotle, nature was not chaos. It was structure. Every creature, every object, every soul carried within it a purpose, a final cause, what he called the telos. The acorn's purpose was to become the oak. The eye's purpose was to see. The human hand's purpose was to grasp. And so, by the same reasoning, Aristotle argued, certain human beings carried within them a natural fitness to command, while others bore a natural inclination to serve. In his words, some are slaves by nature, not because of accident or misfortune, but because their very essence inclines them toward subordination. To the modern ear, this sounds monstrous. Yet we must be cautious not to dismiss too quickly, for Aristotle was not speaking merely of chains and whips. His claim was metaphysical, rooted in his theory of the soul. He divided the human being into parts: the rational, the spirited, and the appetitive. Those who lived mostly in appetite, guided by base desires, lacked the reason necessary to direct their own lives. They required rulers. By contrast, those endowed with strong rational faculties were born to lead. Thus, inequality was not an aberration to Aristotle. It was the very skeleton of human existence. Consider what this means. Equality in his system would not only be impossible, it would be unnatural. To treat the irrational as though they were rational would distort the balance of society. To place the incapable in positions of authority would lead not to justice, but to chaos. Order required hierarchy, and hierarchy, for Aristotle, was as intrinsic to humanity as the relationship between master and tool, body and soul. Here lies the first shiver of recognition. Stripped of the harsh vocabulary, don't we still live by fragments of Aristotle's logic? We elect leaders because we believe some are more fit to govern than others. We defer to doctors, scientists, and engineers because their specialized knowledge surpasses our own. Even in friendships or families, some naturally lead while others follow. Beneath our proclamations of equality, we acknowledge, often silently, that capacity is not evenly distributed. But Aristotle went further, making his doctrine explicit and unyielding. He was not merely describing differences in ability. He was proclaiming them as destiny. To him, the slave by nature could never rise above his condition, just as the oak can never become an eagle. Such determinism, while chilling, rests on a profound observation: that freedom is not only the absence of chains, but the presence of self-mastery. Those who cannot master themselves, he argued, cannot truly be free. It is here we begin to see why his thought provokes such discomfort. If we accept his premise, then the dream of equality falters before it begins. Human society must always organize itself around inherent differences. Yet if we reject his premise entirely, we face a different problem. How do we explain the persistence of inequality despite centuries of striving to erase it? Perhaps Aristotle was not wrong in observing inequality, but in sanctifying it as permanent. Yet even this correction does not free us from the tension. For though we recoil at his acceptance of slavery, we find ourselves haunted by the stubborn truth: not all people are equally equipped, and societies, even those that proclaim equality, still rank and sort human lives. As we reflect, the question sharpens: are we outraged because Aristotle's doctrine is false, or because it is uncomfortably true? As Friedrich Nietzsche once warned, he who despises himself still respects himself as one who despises. Perhaps in our rejection of Aristotle, we preserve his presence, struggling against him not because he is irrelevant, but because he exposes a crack in the foundation of our ideals. And so, we stand at a crossroads. If Aristotle's natural inequality is real, then equality is nothing but a myth we tell ourselves. But if it is false, then why has history, time and again, proven his vision so difficult to escape? In the next section, we will step away from Aristotle's ancient polis and look to history itself. Empires, revolutions, and modern democracies. Each has tried to dismantle hierarchy, yet each has found new forms of inequality rising from its ashes. If Aristotle saw inequality as a natural law, then history itself can be read as humanity's rebellion against him. Time and again, men and women have risen in defiance of hierarchy, driven by the belief that a more equal world is not only possible but necessary. Empires fell, revolutions erupted, constitutions were written with trembling hands, all in the name of dismantling the old orders of privilege. Yet, curiously, in every instance, new hierarchies emerged, as though inequality were a hydra that grows two heads for everyone cut off. Consider the French Revolution. The cry of liberté, égalité, fraternité thundered through Paris. Aristocrats were dragged into the streets, and the old hierarchies of birth and title were shattered. For a brief moment, it seemed that equality had triumphed. But what followed? A republic that devoured itself in blood. A new ruler, Napoleon, rose, draped not in silk but in military glory. The monarchy of birth was replaced with the monarchy of ambition. Inequality had not disappeared. It had merely changed costume. The same pattern unfolds across history. The Bolshevik Revolution in Russia promised the end of class domination. Workers would no longer serve capitalists. The state would belong to the people. Yet within a few years, a new ruling elite, the party, emerged with privileges and powers far beyond the common citizen. The revolution that sought equality produced gulags, purges, and the iron fist of Stalin. Again, Aristotle's ghost seemed to whisper, hierarchy is not abolished, only transformed. Even modern democracies, which pride themselves on equality before the law, reveal this tension. The ballot box gives every citizen a vote, yet wealth, influence, and access to education tilt the scales. Opportunities concentrate, power circulates among elites, and invisible hierarchies harden. We preach equality in principle but live inequality in practice. It is not chains or crowns that divide us now, but salaries, networks, and hidden privileges. What does this pattern tell us? Perhaps that Aristotle's doctrine of natural inequality, while repulsive in form, captured something inescapable about human society. Differences in talent, discipline, and circumstance perpetually recreate hierarchy, no matter how violently we attempt to dismantle it. It is as if inequality is written not only into biology, but into the very dynamics of human organization. Yet history also shows something else, something Aristotle himself may have underestimated. Each revolt, though it fails to eliminate inequality, reshapes its form. The French Revolution, despite its blood, toppled aristocratic privilege. The Russian Revolution, despite its horrors, pushed industrial labor into political relevance. Modern democratic struggles, though imperfect, expand rights once unthinkable. Inequality survives, but it mutates, bending under pressure. Perhaps this is humanity's paradoxical triumph. We cannot erase inequality, but we can redefine its boundaries. And yet, is this enough? Does reconfiguring hierarchy satisfy the hunger for equality, or does it merely prolong the illusion? Imagine telling a starving worker in 19th century Manchester that though he lives in misery, at least he is freer than a medieval serf. Such words would ring hollow. Progress exists, yes, but so too does the unyielding presence of disparity. Here we encounter a darker possibility. What if equality is not a destination but a perpetual horizon? We march toward it, we demand it, but like a mirage in the desert, it recedes the closer we approach. The revolutions of history do not prove Aristotle wrong. They prove how desperately we wish he were wrong. The German philosopher G.W.F. Hegel once remarked, "The history of the world is none other than the progress of the consciousness of freedom." Yet freedom, as history shows, does not eliminate inequality, it reframes it. Every age invents new forms of domination alongside new claims to justice. And so we are left with a grim recognition. The struggle for equality is not a straight road leading to some final utopia. It is a spiral, circling endlessly, revisiting the same contradictions in different costumes. This brings us back to Aristotle, not to agree with his acceptance of slavery, but to confront the enduring force of his insight. Humanity may rage against hierarchy, but it cannot wholly escape it. In the next section, we must leave history's battlefield and descend into the intimate terrain of psychology and biology, where inequality roots itself not in institutions but in the very structure of human beings. Strip away the flags of nations, the creeds of revolutions, and the machinery of governments. What remains? The raw human being, naked in body, restless in mind. If equality fails again and again in history, perhaps the failure is not political but biological, not cultural but psychological. Perhaps Aristotle's shadow lingers because inequality germinates not from law but from life itself. Begin with the body. No two humans are born equal in strength, health, or resilience. One child inherits robust lungs. Another inherits a genetic disease. One grows tall and powerful, another weak and frail. These differences ripple through every stage of existence. The stronger laborer may command higher wages. The healthy child may excel in school, unburdened by chronic illness. The smallest biological accident, the alignment of DNA, can determine the trajectory of a life. Laws may declare equality, but blood chemistry whispers otherwise. Then comes the mind, even more ruthless in its inequalities. Intelligence is not evenly distributed. Creativity is not evenly gifted. Discipline, willpower, charisma. These qualities emerge unequally, and they shape destinies. The brilliant mathematician sees patterns others cannot. The eloquent orator moves crowds others cannot reach. The disciplined worker endures tasks others abandon. Is this justice or simply reality? Equality as an idea smashes itself against the cold fact that human minds, like human bodies, are not interchangeable units. Yet it is not only talent that divides us. It is also temperament. Some are born cautious, others reckless. Some are optimistic, others haunted by despair. These invisible traits form hierarchies more powerful than wealth or law. A society may insist all citizens are equal, but when one person radiates confidence and another trembles with doubt, equality dissolves in the space between them. Even deeper still lies desire. Humans do not even want the same things. One hungers for power, another for safety. One dreams of fame, another of quiet love. Desire is unequal in intensity and in kind. How then could outcomes ever be equal when the starting points are so divergent? And then there is the ultimate inequality, time. Each human life is brief, yet not equally so. One child dies at birth, another lives to 100. One generation grows in peace, another in war. No principle of fairness governs the lottery of mortality. To be human is to live under the tyranny of unequal time. If all of this is true, if inequality is stitched into flesh, mind, and fate, why do we still crave the opposite? Why do we still march for equality, legislate for it, sacrifice for it? Perhaps because equality is not a reflection of reality, but a rebellion against it. It is our refusal to bow before nature's cruelty. It is our demand that despite the unevenness of the world, dignity must remain unbroken. Still, the paradox deepens. Dignity may be universal, but outcomes cannot be. The same soil that produces compassion also produces cruelty. The same world that births geniuses also births mediocrity. To deny this is to live in fantasy. To accept it without resistance is to abandon justice. Humanity staggers between these poles, never able to reconcile them fully. The psychologist Carl Jung once observed, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you do not know, the world will tell you." And what the world tells us, often brutally, is that who we are is not equal to who others are. It reminds us with every exam, every contest, every heartbreak, every opportunity lost or won. And yet, perhaps this very inequality is the soil of meaning. Without differences, there would be no striving, no admiration, no story worth telling. A world where all were equal in every respect would not be heaven. It would be silence. No heroes, no artists, no rebels, no lovers burning against the odds. Equality, if absolute, would erase the drama of being human. Thus we circle back. Aristotle's insight was not only political but existential. Inequality is not just a structure of society. It is the structure of life itself. And so we arrive at the final question, the one that pulls like a thorn in the heart. If true equality is impossible, what should we do with this knowledge? Despair, accept, or transform it? This is where the journey must end, at the threshold between resignation and hope. The journey ends where it began, in the human heart, torn between what is and what ought to be. We have seen Aristotle's cold doctrine of natural inequality, traced the revolts of history that could not escape hierarchy, and uncovered the biological and psychological roots of disparity. The evidence presses down like a weight. Humans will never be truly equal. But the question that remains is not whether equality is possible. It is whether equality is still necessary. For what is the alternative? To abandon equality as a principle would be to strip away one of humanity's most luminous aspirations. Without the dream of equality, what shield protects the weak from the strong? What voice defends the poor against the powerful? What force prevents society from descending into the brutal law of the jungle? Even if the dream is impossible, it may still be indispensable. Equality may never fully exist in the world, yet it must exist in the conscience of humanity, like a star that guides even if it can never be reached. Perhaps this is why the struggle continues. Each generation inherits both the reality of inequality and the vision of equality. The tension itself becomes the story of humanity. We resist hierarchy not because we can abolish it, but because resistance gives us dignity. We demand equality not because nature grants it, but because demanding it makes us more than nature. In this sense, the impossible dream is not a failure, it is a form of defiance. And yet, defiance carries its own danger. If we refuse to acknowledge the reality of inequality, we may fall into delusion, crafting systems that promise justice but deliver tyranny. History has already shown this with revolutions that, in the name of equality, built new prisons of oppression. A mature philosophy must therefore walk a narrow line, neither surrendering to despair nor clinging to fantasy. It must affirm the ideal of equality as a moral compass while acknowledging inequality as an eternal condition. This balance demands humility, to recognize that differences of talent, fortune, and desire will never vanish is not to excuse cruelty. It is to ground our pursuit of justice in reality. A society that admits inequality can design systems to soften its cruelties, to prevent it from hardening into tyranny. Equality may not be the state of the world, but it can be the spirit of our laws, the ethic of our relationships, the demand that even the least among us carries an inviolable worth. Perhaps Aristotle himself missed this nuance. In declaring that some are natural rulers and others natural slaves, he sanctified inequality while neglecting the universal dignity that would later become the heartbeat of moral thought. He saw the differences but not the common humanity. Our task is not to erase differences but to refuse to let them define the value of a life. Herein lies the paradox. Equality is both impossible and indispensable. Impossible because nature and history conspire against it. Indispensable because without it we lose the very meaning of justice. Humanity must therefore live in contradiction, striving for what it cannot attain, holding ideals it cannot fully embody. This is not hypocrisy, it is the essence of the human condition. As Simone de Beauvoir wrote, "Change your life today. Don't gamble on the future. Act now, without delay." Perhaps equality is less a destination and more a continual act, a refusal to accept the tyranny of what is as the only possible reality. We may never arrive, but the striving itself shapes us, redeems us, and keeps us human. So let us return to that crowded square, the voices rising with impossible demands. They chant not because they will succeed in creating perfect equality, but because in chanting, they resist the coldness of nature, the determinism of biology, the hierarchies of history. They remind us that though humans will never be truly equal, they can be truly human, creatures who dream against the odds, who build meaning from contradiction, who live in defiance of inevitability. The dream of equality, then, is not a lie. It is a light, one that reveals the darkness, one that forces us to walk straighter even when the ground beneath us will never be level.